How
I'm
will
just
the
gonna.
recording be used?
Oh, well, I'm just gonna basically record this and then I have to edit it for my class. I have to like shorten it up and then I just have to submit it
Oh,
to my
so you actually
professor.
turn in the recording. It's not a paper?
Yeah. Yeah, I have to
Oh,
turn it
okay.
in. So there's more
Okay.
pressure there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And how long are you looking for it to be?
Oh, like not even 30 minutes. I'm expecting this to
Okay.
be like pretty short.
Okay. All right, cool.
All right. So without a further ado, let's get started. First question that I want to ask you. When you first started teaching, what was like technology used? Like how was it used with teaching? Was it very extensive or was it sort of kind of bare bones minimum where, maybe it was more of a gimmick than it was actually used like every day in the classroom?
I would not say when I started teaching it was a gimmick at all.
Mm,
It was already used very extensively. I started teaching about a decade ago.
hmm
And all my teaching experience is at OU. So at the time, the technology that I was using the most, that I expect a lot of the teachers were using the most, was D2L,
hmm
which got replaced with Canvas a few years later. I was a grad student at the time, just kind of getting used to what is teaching. So I mainly just stuck with using D2L. I think the transition to Canvas was definitely helpful. I think it's a lot more user-friendly of a platform, although D2L has changed in the meantime for sure. I do know at that time I wasn't using clickers in the classroom, but I know a lot of teachers were using clickers, especially in like some of the STEM classes. Physics is where I heard of it a lot. So I would say already the learning management systems, the clickers, they were being used quite a bit.
So it was already kind of implemented to where like it was like used like every day, is what you're saying.
It's hard to remember, but I think so.
Yeah, 2013 was I'm assuming it was around that time
It
was
was around that time.
feels like it was ages ago. From what I can remember from at least my personal experience is that I was like only in fifth grade at this time, but
Okay.
I remember the first time that we actually used technology in class is when we
Oh.
were like given iPads and we would use it
Oh.
for like it's basically like interactive learning where you would go on and you would do questions and that kind of stuff. And that was like really the first time like we used that sort of stuff for learning because even though I went to public school as a kid, we couldn't afford computers. So while a lot of other kids were doing like cool math and all that kind of stuff, that was like
Mm-hmm.
foreign to me.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so when I first started off, it was very like minimum usage. And it wasn't really until I think high school is when we started doing like online submissions and stuff like that.
Okay. Okay.
What is if you don't mind me asking, what is like D12? Is it like similar to Canvas and like how you like will like submit stuff or is
Yes.
there
D2L. So desire to
D2L?
learn. Yes, very similar to Canvas. And I think it's actually gotten even more similar to Canvas over the
Mm,
years. And I know there are other systems. Blackboard is a popular one that comes to mind. And I'm sure there's others I don't know the name of, but they're kind of that all-encompassing learning management system.
mm. So my next question is, so try to remember right before the pandemic happened, either like
Okay.
late 2019 or early 2020. What can you remember from that time, sort of like student interactions and just, talking with students? What can you remember it being like before COVID sort of came in?
Are we talking in terms of technology or just in
Yeah,
general?
like with technology, like what role do you think it played before Zoom started to become more like used like mainstream? Like where do you think it kind of laid in that sort of
Mhm.
dynamic?
Maybe it was less expected to
Mm,
be such a pervasive thing in classes. I feel like since 2020, I don't even know if it's like an active expectation. It's more
yeah.
just classes use technology. We were
Mm,
on Zoom for a long time. Everything had to be moved online if it wasn't already online. I think before that, it was maybe a little bit more normal to have work
Right.
you were doing on paper more frequently.
Yeah. Like to say that, like, let's say that like a student is sick, right?
Hmm.
Before
Hmm.
2020, at least from what I experienced, going online wasn't really something you did. It was just, okay, you're sick.
Hmm.
Well, just try and
Yes.
show up when you get better, you know?
Yep.
So was that not really a thing then?
In my experience, I don't really know if anyone was doing it.
No.
At OU, I don't even know if we had a Zoom license that allowed teachers to easily do that.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know because it's not something I heard about.
Yeah, it's that's crazy to think that even before 2020. I mean, I can't even think of like a world where that wouldn't exist, but it's
Hmm.
crazy to think about how it was virtually non-existent back then.
Hmm.
Also, going to the next question, what was it like when, the pandemic first started and it was the first few months of doing the online teaching and, you were still kind of being
Hmm.
prepped on like how all that stuff worked. What was it
Hmm.
like doing like the first Zoom interviews? Did you feel detached from the students? Did you kind of feel like teaching was harder? Like what was it like?
Yeah, I'm trying to think back. I know there was stress involved with just being unfamiliar with Zoom, the
Hmm.
controls. One of the big stressors for me was I teach a lot of math or math-based classes. How do I show that math? It's
Yeah.
not as easy as when it's at the board. So there was a lot of stress with getting used to the technology, stress with how do I record videos? How do I make sure they go over to the cloud? How do I even talk to a camera and record videos? It just
Right.
felt very different. In terms of connecting with students, I wouldn't say it was the technology that made it feel like it was harder to connect. I think it was just such a tough time and
Hmm.
people were going through so much.
Hmm.
So I don't necessarily think the technology itself, led to a disconnect or anything. And in fact, I found a lot of students really liked using the chat where they
Hmm.
wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable speaking up in class. They would feel comfortable sending me a direct message. So
Hmm.
I wouldn't necessarily say I felt more disconnected due to jumping on Zoom.
Hmm.
I think a disconnection was more related to what was going on in the
Yeah.
world.
There was just quite a lot on everybody's
Yeah.
minds in
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah.
So in a way, you would say that in some aspects, it actually kind of improved the relationship that you were able to build with the students, where students felt more comfortable reaching out if they had like questions or if they had answers.
Hmm.
It was more, I guess you could say, relaxing or less stressful for them to do so.
I definitely think that was a nice thing to find that there are certain ways to communicate with students that maybe is less stressful than raising a hand and speaking up in a classroom. So I think that was a good thing to find, a valuable tool to have.
Right.
Hmm.
I want to branch off to my final question, actually.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, as I told you, this interview is going to be pretty short. But when you look back on how things were in 2013, how it was still very kind of I don't want to say like caveman times and in
No,
terms of
not caveman
technology.
times. No.
But if you look at it compared to today, what are some differences that you see and the dynamics that you have with students now compared to how it was back then?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a tough question because, you know, the teacher, me as the teacher, is not static either. So it wasn't just technology changed. I was learning new things and
Mhm.
hopefully getting a little better every year with using technology. Could you ask the question again?
Oh yeah, sure. Based on like how when obviously 10 years ago you were first starting off as a teacher. Now,
Hmm.
you've got 10 years of experience. How do you think the advance of usage of technology in the classroom has sort of helped you become a better teacher and gain more experience in the classroom?
I think the wider use of technology has um, made it easier to communicate with students in an organized way. So
Mm,
it's not just making an announcement in the classroom and hoping people are there to hear it. It's technology, I think, has helped me communicate with students on the general housekeeping of a course, like making sure they have different ways to keep on top of assignments that are due.
right.
For example, I can post announcements. I can make assignments so it shows up on their to-do list or it shows up on their calendar. So I think technology has given us a lot more freedom to give students reminders to help keep them on track, and they have different ways to view those reminders so they can kind of use them how they like to best.
Mm.
So I
So
do think technology has improved organization.
yeah, I would definitely say that looking back from just maybe even 3 years ago, just the way that it's so easy to go online, just like with
Mhm.
one click of the button to see what everything,
Mhm.
that you have coming up
Mhm.
is. It is a lot more
Yeah.
convenient than kind of having to like, get like something or take notes like
Mhm.
independently, like fill out a notebook somewhere and just list down everything that you had to do when it's just right there
Mhm.
in front of you.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I would have to agree with you that it has made things a lot more simplified.
And I know from just feedback that students do have said they appreciate those online reminders and being able to kind of tailor them to how they want to view them, how they
Yeah.
want the notifications. So that's heartening. I think that's hopefully a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's been a good thing for me, and I know it's been a good thing for a lot of my peers. But with that, that is going to do it for this interview. Once again, I told you it was going to be pretty short.
Okay.
But thank you so much for answering my questions, and I hope that
Yeah.
I was able to provide good questions for you to answer. This is only like my second really professional interview, so I'm still working
Gotcha.
on it. But I
Yeah.
appreciate your time. I
I
really do.
am curious about that. If you have time and you want to take that out of the recording,
Hmm.
I am
Um,
curious to know how you feel about interviewing.
it's still a little scary because when you first start off, you have to sort of be like, okay, so these talking points that I want to get to, I have to kind of because you have to sort
Mm.
of figure out a way to bridge between all of them,
Hmm.
whether that's
Hmm.
just like something that you interject between your questions, and then you're like, well, speaking on that topic or something like that, and then you just go into the next one.
Yeah.
So I'm still working on that. I
Yeah.
actually I interviewed the first interview I ever did was this guy from the Houston Chronicle, which is like the
Mm.
biggest newspaper in Houston, and he was a
Yeah.
reporter. He does like baseball stuff, and I just like I just tickled his brain about his job for like an
Oh, okay.
hour, and it was
Uh-huh.
very messy, but it was kind of like my gateway into sort of like being able to ask those kinds of questions and to try
Yeah.
and get as much information as possible.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm better than I was a year ago, but
Yeah.
there's
It
always room for
practice.
improvement. Yeah, practice
Practice
with
is so
anything makes
essential.
perfect.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Cool.
But yes, once again, thank you so much for the time. And
Yeah.
I know it's kind of like a weird thing because there's probably a lot of other students that would like, use this for meteorology stuff. But
Oh, no, no, no. Hey, whatever. I hope it was helpful.
it was very helpful. So, yes, thank you so much once again for doing
Yeah.
this. And I hope you have a fantastic day.
Yeah, you
And
too.
thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll see you later.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.